Hi, thank you for joining us on Tungsten Tech Talk. My name is Emily Nash-Walker, and I'm the head of product management for Invoice Automation. And joining me is Mattias. Mattias, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Emily. Yeah, so my name is Mattias Reichler, and I work as a product owner and a portfolio lead here at Tungsten Automation. And I've spent more than a decade developing software to automate document automation processes and specifically invoice automation.
Fantastic. And we're here to talk about how to achieve straight-through processing and AP essentials. So, when we talk about invoices, how are we actually processing those to get straight-through or touchless processing? What are the documents that we're processing?
So if we specifically talk about a capture process, an invoice capture process, we receive paper and PDF invoices, supplier invoices on behalf of the buyer, and then we try to automate that process in order to feed that into their ERP system.
Okay, that's
So
that's really interesting, but I'm curious, isn't a PDF an e-invoice?
not really because there's no it's not structured the same way and it's not defined. The structure is not defined the same way as an XML or Edifact, or there are other formats of electronic invoices that are structured and defined so that it's easier to read. So in a PDF, you do have structured elements, but they differ from invoice to invoice and from PDF creator to PDF creator. There are multiple different sources that create PDFs. So I wouldn't say that it's an electronic invoice, even though it's created electronically.
So is that because if I'm creating an invoice, I can go into Word or Excel and just create a PDF or my ERP?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
You can have an add-on creating an open source freeware creating PDFs, and many times there are multiple errors within those text layers and structure layers, so that it's basically impossible to read. You have to do OCR anyway, even though it's an electronic document.
Okay, and that's because they're all created differently, so the data that comes
Yeah.
with them is different.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. So if I get a PDF or a paper invoice, I have to take it through OCR, correct?
Correct. We do OCR and we read the text layer. We do multiple things, but in order to simplify, we try to turn the image into a digital layer that can be processed downstream. That's what we do. Yes.
Okay, great. So, what we really want to demystify is straight through processing because a lot of our customers are looking for touchless invoicing. When they actually get invoices in the door, however they get them, they our customers want to process those invoices as fast as possible. So, how do they achieve that?
Absolutely. So if we look at the invoice capture process, like I said, we receive PDF and paper invoices on behalf of the buyers. We have multiple ways for them to get those invoices into our system. They can scan them, they can email them in, etc. But okay, let's focus on okay, we have the document, we have the picture of that invoice. So what we do is the first step is we do something called OCR, optical character recognition. So we turn that image into a digital text layer that can be read and understood by software, basically. Secondly, as a customer, you want that captured invoice data to be valid, and you want it to be formatted in such a way that it can be understood by your ERP system. And in order to do that, we perform some validation steps to make sure that the data has that correct formatting and all the fields that you need from the invoice are actually present for every single invoice. Lastly, but not least, you also want that incoming invoice document to be matched automatically against the correct supplier and correct buyer in case you have multiple buyers. Now, most customers have multiple buyers. So you want those three steps to be performed automatically by the system. And when that's achieved, you have a touchless or a straight-through processing of captured invoices that can be processed downstream.
So this is a scenario where it sounds simple, but anything that sounds
Mhm.
simple isn't. We've got a
True.
great graph that maybe we should share. For those who are listening, this graph is something that you can download from our website. And from those who are watching, you can see how we can achieve straight through processing with invoices. So maybe Matthias, just so that way everybody who's watching and hopefully later downloads the actual infograph later if they're listening, maybe you can walk us through this graphic based on what you just said.
So on the left-hand side, we see the steps that I just briefly went over. You have the PDF and paper invoice, it's scanned or emailed in, and the AP Essentials then performed optical character recognition to get the data into a digital format. We have buyer identification, if needed. If you have several buyers, you have supplier identification, and then you have a validation step where data is verified. Now that can happen automatically in the case where all the rules are satisfied and the data is accurate enough for you to do additional downstream processing. And that's the right side of the screen where you do line pairing, for example,
So
against the purchase order.
before we get to the right side, just so that way I understand. So the invoice comes in. Now, it's great that we identify the supplier because in an example where FedEx, everybody uses FedEx
Mm-hmm.
or some type of DHL type of courier service. So I can imagine that just identifying FedEx or DHL is one thing, but since everybody uses those, they've got different offices and different branches and different location. So in that supplier identification, I would identify the supplier and maybe some additional detail around that supplier so that way I can expect what kind of detail is on the invoice. Is that where maybe I go into that online learning and that document type classification?
Sort of. So supply identification is not trivial. It might sound easy to just compare to what we call supplier master data, but that's not what we do. So when you have processed an invoice, we look at the entire document from that submitter of the invoice. So your supplier, as a customer, you have your supplier base, and the system will learn actually your supplier. So the next time an
Okay.
invoice comes in, it will look at the entire document structure to identify the supplier. And it's incredibly accurate compared to just looking for specific things like an address or a name or something like that that changes. But if we look at the entire document, it's much more accurate.
So this is my data, and the more I use it, it sounds like the better it gets, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So the
So so tell me then about how getting that data then relates to the right-hand side of the screen.
So once you get that data through the capture process, you have data to work with, then you can move on to do additional matching. And this is up to individual customers, what they need to do and how they need to process their invoices. But I would say the majority of companies today, they have order-based invoices and they have expense invoices. That's just generally what they have. But for PO invoices, uh, you generally do line pairing, which means you take the lines from the order and you compare them to the incoming invoice document and you do matching. And in this part of the matching process, of course, you also want to achieve uh, touchless processing as far as possible to do auto matching and things like that, which we support. But as you can imagine, it's depending on the invoice, there can be hundreds of lines, and all those needs to be matched to an order. And this is not trivial either to do. And then on top of that, you might want to do additional matching like price checks and make sure you've received the goods or services before you approve the invoice. Uh, and also account coding, but maybe we should uh, stop at order matching first to see if
It sounds like getting a lot of data and making sure that data flowing to from my ERP into whatever system the OCR, the AP Essential system is key to make sure that I can do that two and three-way matching, correct?
it's definitely key to get accurate data in order to do the automation and the processes that you need to do as a customer for your invoices. Um,
Excellent. And how, tell me a little bit about how you recommend we do non-PO invoices. I know that there's a lot of conversation around maybe routing it for approval. Do you think that the data that is on the invoice, we can actually do some type of um, straight through processing in AP Essentials for my non-PO invoices?
For expense invoices, it's really tricky to say because it's up to each individual customer. But at a high level, what we try to do is we try to use account coding suggestions, which means we try to help you do the account coding, which is can be fairly complex for customers, but it can also be really trivial for other customers to do. So it really depends on the level of detail and the level of accounting that each individual buyer is in need of. But the account coding suggestions is there to help you, and it helps you. It remembers what you coded the previous invoices from that specific supplier. So that's how we try
That
to do
sounds
that.
really great though. If it remembers the last account coding that I used, so that way it's fewer keystrokes.
It can definitely be a great help to avoid to have a low touch process when it comes to account coding, and also for the order matching. If you have auto matching and the system remembers what to match and how to match that, then it will help you to have a low touch and a higher grade of automation. Because at the end of the day, that's what our customers are looking for. They are looking to reduce the effort needed to get these invoices into their ERP system.
Okay, that sounds really great. I know that there, as many who are listening might know, this is an entire series. And if you weren't aware of that, my hope is that you'll go onto the website and check out some of the additional podcasts in this series. But I know that one, you mentioned a few times that there are some details that are customer specific. And there is an episode that many hopefully will listen to that Ethan Shackle is leading that talks a little bit about configurations, because it sounds like from a customer perspective, there may be a either process flow or details that we want to sit down with a consultant to make sure that that mapping is accurate. So that way I can get as efficient touch through processing as I possibly can with the data once I've got it.
Definitely. That's definitely something you want to do because there's so many best practices that we've picked up over the years that we want to bring to our customer base. And it's sometimes it's not easy for the individual customer because they're working with their own data, right? But we've seen this process so many times. So we can suggest best practices and how you get your data and what data you actually need to verify and what data you don't need in downstream processing. And
And for those of
making
you
those
And then for those of you who just saw our pause and our laugh, this is very real, and this is definitely more YouTube than Hollywood. So so I think that in summary, then, what we really just want to emphasize is that straight through processing in AP Essentials is absolutely very possible and it is very doable. The keys to this really are focusing on the OCR accuracy in data extraction and verification, and then making sure that you have as much information as possible, as much data as possible available when you do any two or three-way matching upfront or any non-PO invoice processing in AP Essentials. Of course, there's also the additional ability that many listening to this podcast may decide to capture as much data as they can upfront and have that straight through processing occur. And if there are corner cases or use cases of their invoicing where they do need to process the invoice in an AP workflow, that is also possible as well. Well, this was very interesting and fascinating. My hope is that many learned about straight through processing and some of the demystification of it. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
I think that this is something that you might not any customer you don't think about these things. It sounds like capture is very easy, but there are definitely aspects that are non-trivial. But when they happen automatically, well, then everyone's happy, right? And that's what we try to achieve. We try to achieve that simplistic view of okay, we gather your documents and we put them through a process and we pull them into whatever downstream process that you need to do as a customer with your invoices.
And is all of this possible right now within AP Essentials?
All of this is possible. What we are looking at the screen to achieve straight-through processing with the data verification step and also achieve high grades of touchless processing in the rest of the workflow steps. Definitely.
And And looking forward, I know that there are improvements within the AP Essentials data accuracy, OCR accuracy, and I should say enhancements. I think that I'm excited to really share that there's a future podcast that hopefully many will listen to around some of the enhancements and the features that will be in the next version of AP Essentials that will be released in January. So I'm excited about that as well. That'll also further enhance and increase straight through processing. So thank you so much for listening to this Tech Talk. And I look forward to hearing from customers, and I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.